I knew. I was like, you know what? Let me just record just in case. Just in case. Just in case. Just in case something pops out. I don't know. I knew I should have recorded. Oh, finally I do something smart. What's up, everybody? It's time for another Calibria Crystal Gardens video, and today we have a doozy of a video. We are going to review every single Dark 3-star in the entire game. Every single one. All four. Oh, there's only 4 of them. All 4 of them. Okay, let's... very, very long video. Let's get it started. First on the list is a Dark Nat 3... They're all Dark Nat 3s. Dark Nat 3 attack unit, Alice. She's got a crazy, I like her style. I like the crazy units, right? I like the crazy units that aren't like, this is just a golem. Like, well, you know what? I like golems. Whatever. But I like the crazy ones especially. And then she gets even crazier when she's, evolved. Not too shabby. She's an attack type unit. Let's take a look at what she does. She's got, Fire Shadow Bombs deal 370% of attack and damage. Attack has an additional 30% crit rate. That's just for this attack, though. So you still do have to stack crit on her. You can't be like, oh, I can get away with lower crit rate. It's just this. She doesn't crit buff herself. It's just the additional crit rate for this this skill. And then what do we have for skill 2? Toss 3 Shadow Meteors at an enemy 3 times. Each check deals 190% of attack and damage, lowers the target's max HP by 30% of the damage dealt. May reduce target's max HP up to 40%. It's kind of like Destroy, right? Destroying some of their max HP. Effect does not work on bosses. So it doesn't work on bosses, so the best bet to use this would be to use it against tanks, like big HP tanks, maybe in Guild Wars. That's what I would think to use this one in Guild Wars. I haven't really played around too much with the lair just yet, so I'm not sure. Well, it doesn't work against bosses, right? So that answers the question there. So Guild Wars, I feel like this, because you want to do it faster in arena offense. Like you want to like cleave faster, so you're really not going to be like going slow and steady. With Guild Wars though, you can take a little bit more time and be a little bit like, okay, well, they got a bunch of HP tanks, so let me take her in, let me reduce their HP, and let me just pick things off one by one after that, and be a little bit more slow and higher success rate, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And we have Teddy Strike, show enemies a teddy bear, and attack 4 times at random. Each attack deals 200% of attack and damage. Enemies that are struck more than once will take an additional 50% of own attack and fixed damage. Ignores defense. Enemies that are struck more than once. So I kind of feel like, maybe it's just me, but I was having issues with the Dragoon in Vapor Dreamland, and I was like, or maybe it was the Spy, I don't know, one of those. And I was like, oh my god, he just keeps healing. This is ridiculous. And he was giving me a hard time. And I'm thinking maybe this might be a great thing to take into that, because after I clear the other 2 units from his left, the left and the right, I don't remember what units were there with the Dragoon. I'm thinking like, ooh, that could be a decent unit for somewhere like there. Possibly lair. I gotta start doing this lair, man. I gotta start doing lair. I put the lair off because I'm like, well, I don't have good enough runes. And I'm like, I've maxed out my rune storage. I still don't have good enough runes. Maybe we'll start tinkering around the lair and do some lair content as well. But yeah, this potentially really interesting. This is, I get more excited about the Teddy Strike. Ignore defense, I get excited about, right? Because then you don't need a defense break. You just ignore defense. It's random, so you got to be careful where you take this. Yeah, it is random, so you got to be careful where you take this. But if you're going into any area, like a boss, especially a boss that's based on, like, defense-based, this is great, because then you don't have any other things around. It's just the boss, if it's like one single target unit. So, any single target units that are super defense tanky, like, big defense tanky bosses, this is going to be great against, because it's just going to, always strike it more than once, right? So, you're going to get 3 hits of ignore defense, or 3 hits with extra ignore defense. And then it goes up and reduce cooldown down to 3. Shadow Void, create a room of entrapment with the shadows. Some of these descriptions sound like really cool visually, and then like they're not anything visually. It's like, oh, that's not anything crazy visually. Creates a room of entrapment with the shadows to attack all enemies 2 times. 155% of attack and damage, 40% chance to reduce target's energy, and slow, if they're slowed, stun them for 1 turn. So you need a combo with something else that's already slowing things, and then you can reduce energy and CC. So this is, again, something that could be cool in, like, Vapor Dreamland. Potentially, honestly, this could be a decent unit for dungeons, because you can actually stun things in dungeons. Like, that might not be too bad. Might not be too bad in dungeons, actually. And then you can ignore defense, so maybe a unit for dungeon. I feel like she's got some potential, though. Then we've got this Killing Psalm. A doll of darkness dances with music to increase attack by 50%. There's no dancing doll. She just increases her attack as a passive. Her passive increases attack, and 70% chance, it goes up to 100% chance to be imbued with a drain effect. So this is passive. She's got vampire. She's got a vampire, leech, lifesteal, whatever you want to call it. Passively increase attack and has a lifesteal. Okay, but then you lack, you don't get this AoE there, right? You're like, oh, lifesteal plus an AoE, good for farming, but you don't get the AoE. You have to choose one or the other. So you still have this. You have to ignore defense and lifesteal, right? And you have that where you could lifesteal with that, but I don't know. So I was looking around. I was playing around with this in just like adventure mode, and I was like, oh, there's no actual doll. I was like waiting for a doll of darkness to come, and I'm like, there's no doll. And we have the passive Cursed Psalm. So I believe, I didn't see this one yet, but I believe this is if she dies, upon its death, the Doll of Darkness curse, a chance to curse poem. Upon its death, 70% chance to reduce all enemies' defense for 3 turns. Ignores resistance, which is crazy. Increase all allies' attack for 3 turns. And it goes up to 100% trigger rate, but she has to die for that to happen. So maybe there's a gimmick to a dungeon or like an arena team where like she takes damage, lethal damage, she dies, and then it's like a mechanic of AoE defense break attack buff, right, for like arena offense. Like let's say you use immunity and you're going into something like knowing she's going to take enough damage to kill her, and then she AoE defense breaks, ignores resistance, attack buffs your team, and then you come in and cleave. You do triple DPS after that, right? Potentially might be a thing. Otherwise, I don't know how this, if that's not how it works, if it works a different way, if there's actually like some kind of token on the map, then that's a different story. But I believe this is just when she dies. Or maybe there could be some gimmick dungeon team of like, she needs to die, and then she's got, like, if you don't have a succubus, it's like, oh, well, maybe I gotta try to make this attack buff defense break work. But I think this is based on her actually dying for this. I didn't hear otherwise, but you know, if I'm wrong, correct me in the comments. But that's just what it looks like. And I was looking around with this. I was playing around with this Killing Psalm, and that's how this works. Doll of Darkness is just it's basically her. There's no actual doll. So this, I assume that there's no actual doll again. That's why I'm saying that. I don't think there's an actual doll. I think it's just on her death. She does that. So, anyway. Yeah. Anyway, she also has a crit rate lead. I don't really get excited about that. I mean, I feel like she's got some potential. I would love to try her out. I think I actually might build this unit, though. Next on list is the Pirate Captain. This unit seems really cool, and I was taking a look at what Foi, I don't know if you guys know, Foi / What the Foi, Twitch streamer, YouTuber, was very active in the Summoners War community. He had some ideas for using him in the lair. He was theory crafting some teams, saying he's a really, really good unit for the lair. So let's take a look at what he does. He's got some skills that activate when enemies die. He's got some skills that heal the team and haste the team as well. So let's take a look at that. He also has first skill, ignore defense. Machete is the pirate's best friend. Attack an enemy to deal 170% of attack and damage. If target has no active buffs, this attack will ignore defense. Second skill, nothing better than a good flintlock pistol. Fired at an enemy to deal 520% of attack and damage. If the target is killed, erase all of own negative status effects and gain a bonus attack turn. Also, I was thinking about him that he could potentially be good in those, I call them secret dungeons, but the dungeons basically like where you farm the Voodoo Walker. You open the Voodoo Walker dungeon, and then you farm for the Voodoo Walker, farm for the chips for the Voodoo Walker to summon him. So I was thinking he could be good in those areas as well. Just because if you kill things, you heal the team, right? You kill things, you heal the team. You can even combo up with other units. I kind of want to build this one too. Start playing around with it. I want to build everything now. That's just how I roll. But yeah, gain a bonus attack turn here. So that's pretty cool for things like you got to think about like where you're going to be killing a whole bunch of units, right? So maybe you could run him as a combo with the succubus. Well, I was gonna say run him as a combo with the succubus in dungeons, then, but it's not gonna like you'd rather have like AOE damage if you're running succubus, and then he nukes something and gets another turn, nukes another thing and nukes it, but he's not gonna be able to use this every single turn though. Maybe, I don't know. And then he's got but this is interesting against things like farming, but again you want AOEs for farming too. Like AOEs are just faster, but he's kind of similar to Angel of Death in that aspect. You know what I mean? Anyway, if you like Angel of Death, maybe you'll like him too. Only sailing songs can boost morale on the vast empty ocean. The pirate captain sings a song to restore 15% of all allies' HP and haste them for 2 turns. But look at all that extra recovery amount that you get after the first 15% initially, and then it goes up 10, 10, and 15. That's a lot of recovery. He's a DPS unit that's a healer too. And haste, which means they're going to get more turns. Haste is great. Probably a very underrated buff in my opinion, because your team just gets so much more turns after that. But this is a pretty nice skill for a DPS unit. So, but I mean that skill's not really doing any DPS, but you get the idea. Barrage, this modified flintlock fires rapidly to attack all enemies 3 times. Each attack deals 70% of attack and 4% of targets max HP in damage. 30% chance to slow targets for 2 turns. This could also be decent for dungeons, so I feel like there's a lot of potential for this guy, I feel. And ignore defense. Ignore defense. Bonuses. I'm less excited about the bonus attack turn, because there's only a few different places. Like, you have to be fighting against waves of lots of minions, right? Lots of things that are not super tanky. Lots of waves of squishy units to get the most value out of that. But this, I mean, AoE, there's another thing really good against waves of squishy units, but also not bad against bosses because it does extra damage to bosses. 30% chance to slow target for 2 turns. So, I mean, that is already a combo with this, who we were talking about before. If the enemy is slowed, stun them for 1 turn. So he's already a combo with that as well. Yeah, 30% chance. I mean, well, actually, you know what? This isn't a super crazy trigger rate, though. That's kind of the thing there. Not a super crazy trigger rate. Then we have the Seabird's Rage. This is interesting. God of Sea turns into a sea owl, which accompanies sailors. Again, this is not really a thing visually that it's like some amazing graphic animation that you're thinking. It would be cool if it was, but whenever an ally attacks, the owl falls with a lightning strike, which deals 75% of attack and damage. And it goes up a little bit. So every time an ally attacks, he attacks as well. So he always teams up. Potentially interesting if he's always teaming up with things. He's not teaming up with Ignore Defense, though, I don't believe. That would be even better. Passive Pirate's Yell. A crazed pirate never hides his love for victory upon killing an enemy. 70% chance to increase own attack and crit rate for 3 turns and restore 25% of all allies' HP. Again, another thing for when he kills an enemy. So I feel like this is one build for him. If you're going to be farming dungeons, like farming the dungeons like the Voodoo Walker or something like that, could be, I'm sorry, not that one, this one. Well, actually, this would be good for there too, though. But like, if you're going to be killing a lot of enemy minions, that would be one build. And then this could be like a dungeon build, or like a build for Dreamland, or a lot of things. So I see this is another one I want to build and play around with, because I think he's got a lot of potential as well. He's flexible too. I feel like a lot of these units, like if you build them and you're like, oh, I don't want him for that anymore. Like, well, just switch out his skills and use them in a different way. So I feel like a lot of these things you can't go wrong building them, because you can just change your mind. You're like, oh, I changed my mind later and I want to use it a different way. Well, I can do that in this game. So we hit the halfway mark, guys. Voodoo Walker is next. Okay, so this is an assist unit. Not a DPS unit. Oh, man. So, of course, I'm not going to like him because he's not a DPS unit, right? No, there's parts of me that likes him. There's parts of me that doesn't like him. Let's take a look at his skills. Let's see what he does. First skill, this is a poison. So, remember, I should have commented on this earlier, But again, as I mentioned in the light one, the light Nat 3s, it's hard to skill up a lot of these things, right? Because you need to keep summoning. I mean, luckily, I don't know if luckily, but there's not that many 3 stars, so it's easier to get the 3 stars. If you really are in love with one of these units, you can always convert other LD3s until you get more skill ups for whatever LD3 you want to build. And over time, you'll be able to get more and actually max them, but you can't just feed them regular 3 stars to skill them up. So, keep that in mind, because he's got a poison. It's like, oh, he could be useful for like early game dungeons. Like, yeah, but he's gonna be hard. Early game dungeons are gonna be really hard to skill him up, right? And I don't think I think part of him is like decent for one area, and then like not really the same area as the poison. So I don't really get excited about that. That's like a dungeon unit, dungeon skill. But Witchcraft bursts forth from the ground 5 times at random. Attack does 145% of attack and damage. If it was a DPS unit, this would be exciting, right? 35% chance to dispel 1 buff from targets and replace it with damage reflection effect for 2 turns. Enemies with damage reflection will take 20% of their own damage when attacking. I wish it was like defense break, and I'd be like, oh, okay, that's even more exciting. But it's damage reflection, so do we get super excited about that? I don't know that I'm necessarily super excited about that, but it's random and a strip. And a damage reflection. Maybe there's a gimmick that I'm not seeing to this, but I'm not super excited about it. Acid throws toxins to all enemies 2 times. 130% of attack and damage to each enemy, but he's not really a DPS unit. 40% chance to affect targets with HP regen lock and poison them for 1 turn. Okay, again, it's like, oh, but it's only 40%. It only goes up to a 50% chance, right? So 50% chance to poison and HP regen lock, and not really a whole lot of damage. So I don't get really excited about this just yet. Not really something that entices me to build him yet. Then we have Soul Chain, cast an ancient spell on enemy which connects its souls for 3 turns. It connects its soul, enemy's soul, with your soul connected. Under the status, when self takes damage, target will take the same amount of damage. When the target takes damage, restore equivalent amount of own HP. Damage dealt by Soul Chain will not restore own HP. Potentially cool. This reminds me a little bit of the Dragoon, how the Dragoon works. Kind of yes, kind of no, because it's damage based. It doesn't mean like they have to attack each other necessarily. It just means like when one of them takes damage, this happens. When the other one takes damage, this happens. But I don't know that I don't know. Like this, okay, this doesn't excite me, but potentially I could be missing something very exciting about this. But again, I'm not super excited about that, right? Passive Voodoo Curse. Upon being killed, 70% chance to deal 30%. It goes up to 100. 30% of attackers' max HP and fixed damage, ignores defense, and affects target with HP regen lock for 2 turns. Okay, this is just the attacker's max HP, fixed damage, 30% of attackers max HP. Let's say your attacker, let's say you're using Flame Spirit, she's gonna AoE burst you down, you die, right? Flame Spirit's got 10,000 HP, for example. It does 3,000 HP in damage to her. She's still alive. That didn't really change anything. And then he's dead. How did that change anything? Like, that didn't really change anything. This one, however, Soul Curse, upon being killed, 70% chance to reduce all enemies' energy by 30%, and stun them for 1 turn. This goes up to 100% chance. So when he dies, let's say the enemy is going to Flame Spirit you, right? Double Flame Spirit, right? 2 AoE ignore defense. He dies. 100% chance after that to reduce all enemies' energy and stun them. So if the enemy's second Flame Spirit does not have immunity on it, that's going to get attack age reduced, and that's going to stun, and the rest of your team is going to cut in. This is like the only thing that I really like about this unit. I think this is potentially pretty cool. I mean, a cooldown is 9 turns, but this may be a usable thing for arena defense. That's where I see this. Everything else I don't really get excited about. I'm like, oh, he's got some poisons, but like the Mummy's just better for that. Popo's just better for that. What else? Hydra's better for that. There's so many things that are better for that. Yeah, like every Yaksha. There's so many things that are better for that. But this is potentially something interesting for arena defense. So that's the only really reason that I would see building him, is maybe like a trap defense. If people aren't expecting it, they don't know what's Like you're trying to bait out the double Flame Spirit offense and catch people. Last but not least, Voodoo Walker. So Voodoo Walker has a lot of bleed synergy. He's an attack type unit. Let's see what. Remember, there's bleed, there's burn, and there's poison, and all three are different. So you want to make sure, like, if you're using something with bleed synergy, you may want to pick another unit that, for example, if you're going to use this guy in dungeons with other units that do some form of continuous damage, bleed, poison, or burn, you may want to go for building other units that do bleed specifically so that they have more synergy with him if you want to use them together, instead of using something like Yaksha's got a burn. It's like, okay, well, he's not really going to do extra stuff with the burn. That would be better to pair with like Abyss Lord. So let's take a look at this, and then he would be better to pair with like Popo does bleed, for example. Yeah, he does bleed for skill 1 and skill 3. So, anyway, what does he do? He's got Handsaw, 385% of attack and damage, 75% chance to cause bleed for 1 turn, goes up to 100% when it's maxed. Again, it's harder to max these LD3s, though, because you got to feed them other LD3s. Sharp Sting, attack an enemy 2 times with a Handsaw. Each attack deals 260% of attack and damage, 50% chance to cause target for bleed for 1 turn, and has a drain effect. So this goes up to 60% chance to bleed for 1 turn. But it's 2 hits, right? So more bleed. Bleed skill 1, bleed skill 2. He's very like straightforward. He's like, I make things bleed, and then I do extra stuff when they bleed. Attacks an enemy with a blade of energy, 510% of attack and damage, 85% chance to cause target to bleed for 1 turn. If it does critical damage, gain haste for 2 turns. Up to 100% chance to cause the target to bleed unless it gets resisted. And then 3 turn cooldown for this. Decent damage and bleed. Then we have this passive hunter. The sight of the blood excites Ripper. When attacking, 70% chance to ignore defense goes up to 100% chance. Based on number of bleed effects on the target. Ignore 35% of defense for each bleed effect. So if you have other units that have, I mean, he already does the bleed, but if you have other units that you're bringing in with him that also do bleed effects, he's going to ignore a crazy amount of defense. He's just going to be like, ignore tons of, and ignore defense for 500% damage. That's going to do a lot of damage. I feel like that's going to do, like, if you ignore 100% of defense for 500% damage, I feel like that's going to do a lot of damage. I feel like that's going to be a nice, chunky, beefy skill. And then the Disembowel, it's another one. Upon affecting the enemy with bleed, 70% chance to gain Disembowel status. For 2 turns, increases crit rate to 100%, ignore 50% of defense. So it goes up to 100% trigger rate. Increase crit rate to 100 and ignore 50% of defense. I mean, if you have a low crit rate on your... Let's face it, you have low crit rate on your stuff, so you might want to consider this as well. Ignore 50% of defense. And then again, maybe, well, this one does 260% as well, so... Yeah, he's got a lot of synergy. It's best to just pair him up with other units that do bleed. I mean, if I already said that 9,000 times, but I think he's got potential too. He's also has a... They're not crazy leader skills. Like, obviously, like, the Nat 5s are going to have, like, the best leader skills. Like, so... Especially, like, the LD 5s have... Excuse me, some crazy leader skills. Like, for example, where are you? Why can't I find you? There we go. If we take a look at this leader skill, it's like 50%. 50% attack. That's a huge difference, right? Huge difference. But the leader skills I don't get too excited about, but I do see some synergies with bleed. Anyway, that's it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed it. There's some potential combos. I mean, they're not that bad. I kind of feel like I want to build some of these, but some of these have synergies in one place. There's a decent amount of ignore defense in these. All 3 of these units, actually. Well, all 3 of the DPS units, because she does ignore defense on skill 2. Fixed damage ignores defense. He does ignore defense over here. And then he does ignore defense, well, with his passives. So, there's a decent amount of LD. Like, if you're like, oh, I gotta ignore defense. I need some more units that ignore defense. I mean, aside from Flame Spirit, right? Like, oh, you know what? There's some LD3s that ignore defense. Or most of the LD3s at this point ignore defense. But anyway, that's it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Maybe it gives you some insight or some ideas on, like, what things you may be interested in building. Again, it's hard to skill these up, so maybe consider building if you have like a handful of things that you can skill up the units with. And then maybe if you don't have, you're like, oh, I only have one of this, like maybe put it off until later when you have some more skills for it. But anyway, that's it for this one. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I will see you as always in the next one.